Welcome back to Hot Air, the podcast where we blow the lid off the stories that people in power wish would just disappear. And today, we're talking about something foundational, something that every single one of us has been told that we have, but somehow feels like it's slipping away. Say it with me: free speech. Pausing there for a quick second, I am lit today, and you know I love transparency. I did an online course earlier, and I did take a little bit of Adderall. This was hours and hours and hours ago, but I really wanted to focus, and I got so much done during the course and after the course. Then I went to the gym, and I did an insane cardio day, and I did the cold plunge, and I did the hot tub, and now my body is like, what temperature am I supposed to be? Where am I? And I'm just praying that I can make it through this episode without having a mental breakdown. So I'm lit. We're going to try something where I talk a little bit slower and a little bit calmer, just to kind of balance out the fact that I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin. So that's where I am today. And I hope that you too are having a great time. So today we're going to dive into where free speech comes from, how it's actually classified, the ways people are still being silenced today. And yes, we are going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel getting canceled for his comments about Charlie Kirk and how that is connected directly to Trump's grip on media and money. And of course, because this is hot air, we're going to talk about what all of this means for the LGBTQ plus community, because let's be real, we've always kind of been on the front lines when it comes to fighting for our right to speak, to exist, and to be seen. So go ahead and grab your constitution, give it a quick review so we are all on the same page together, and we're just going to dive right into this episode. So let's hit it. Part 1. What is free speech? We hear that phrase thrown around constantly, and usually it's by someone yelling on cable news or on Twitter or TikTok about how they've been silenced, even as they shout to millions of followers. And usually what they're shouting is some BS. But let's get this straight for a hot minute. Free speech in the United States is rooted in the First Amendment. It says the government can't restrict speech. But, and here's the part that people don't like to talk about, it doesn't mean speech has no limits. The courts have carved out various categories. Political speech, protected. Artistic expression, protected. But then you've got things like direct incitement to violence, true threats, or defamation, and those are not protected. Although those lines are very blurred as of late. But here is the kicker. Your employer, or in this case, a massive corporation like Disney or ABC, they're not government. They can pull your platform at any time. They can silence you in ways the Constitution does not cover. That's where the tension starts. But before we get into that, let's break down some of what courts and legal scholars usually treat as protected or acceptable free speech versus unprotected and unacceptable free speech, especially under US law. So we'll start with generally protected / acceptable free speech. These are the kinds of speech the First Amendment covers. Political speech. Here's an example. Criticizing the president, protesting government policies, or supporting controversial movements. And this is the most highly protected form of speech, or it used to be. Then we have artistic expression. An example is a painting that criticizes religion, or a drag performance, or a satirical comedy sketch. Basically, SNL does all of the above. Again, that is all up for debate as of late. Next, we have offensive or unpopular opinions. An example is saying, I don't support same-sex marriage, or capitalism is evil. The government cannot punish you just because your opinion is unpopular or offensive. We have symbolic speech, like kneeling during the national anthem or burning a flag in protest. Also, two things that have been very criticized in the last few years. And lastly, speech criticizing religion or institutions, like a book saying that organized religion is harmful, or me stating that I don't believe in Jesus. Someone could be offended by that, but that speech should be protected. Now let's talk about the flip side: unprotected and unacceptable free speech. These are categories where free speech protections do not apply under US law. First, we have incitement to imminent lawless action. An example is standing outside of a courthouse and yelling, "Let's burn it down right now," which I really need to watch what I say, because I always say, "I want to burn this place to the ground." Like if I'm irritated at work or or somebody pisses me off, I'm like, I'm going to go to their house and burn it down. Watch me. Obviously kidding. I joke, okay? Next, we have true threats. An example is like emailing someone, "I will kill you tomorrow." I've never done that, and I don't plan on it, but don't test me. Then we have harassment or targeted bullying, which is repeatedly sending someone messages telling them to kill themselves. I mean, that's an example of what that could be. Then we've got defamation, libel, and slander. Example is publishing an article that knowingly and falsely claims a local business owner committed a crime. We're getting into like a little muddy waters here, but next up we've got obscenity, which is like narrowly defined, but an example is disturbing graphic sexual material that's deemed obscene under the Miller test, offensive, no serious value. And this is different from pornography, which is often protected unless it meets that test. I didn't do any research about what that test constitutes, but perhaps at a future date I will. And then lastly, I really don't know where this falls on the list, but it was in the list that I was researching: child pornography, which is absolutely unprotected and no exceptions, rightfully so. But we also have some gray areas or some zones that are kind of up to debate. So these aren't always clear cut, and often they depend on context. So there's hate speech. In the US, hate speech is generally protected unless it crosses into incitement or threats. And in other countries like Germany, Canada, UK, hate speech laws restrict this even more. We also have misinformation and disinformation, which is protected if it's just false opinions, but not if it's fraud, like lying in advertising or knowingly spreading lies that cause specific harm. There's also speech on private platforms like Twitter, or X, I'll always call it Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc., can take down content under their own rules. That's not a First Amendment violation because they're private companies, not the government, except when the government begins to buy them or gets into cahoots with them, just like Trump is like sucking Mark Zuckerberg's dick or whatever. I digress. Reel it in. So that's kind of your general outline of what is accepted, what is not, the gray areas. It's kind of very wishy-washy and even becoming more so as time progresses and as we get farther into this administration's horrible everything. Part 2, how people are still being silenced. Even in 2025, people are being silenced every single day. Sometimes by governments, sometimes by corporations, sometimes by social pressure. I have posted things and tried to run an ad about something that I think is very appropriate. It's based on fact, do my research, and it gets denied, and there's nothing I can do about it. But think about this, like journalists are jailed around the world for reporting inconvenient truths. Content creators get demonized on YouTube for saying the wrong thing, which I'm always worried that the wrong thing is going to slip out of my mouth. And I'm a firm believer in if it does, acknowledge it, learn from it, move forward. But even comedians whose literal job is to push boundaries are losing platforms because their words ruffle the wrong feathers. We've got some sensitive people that are in charge here. One quote that I found really hits. Censorship leaves us in the dark, but with nothing to see, we begin to lose our vision. That was from George R.R. Martin. Yes, the Game of Thrones guy. Even fantasy writers, they get it. So I think it's important that we go over some examples of people that are being stripped of their free speech since Trump took office for his second term. And so this is just in 2025. Here's some recent examples of silenced voices. We have Zoe Zephyr, a Montana state legislator. In 2023, Zoe Zephyr, the first openly trans legislator in Montana, had her microphone cut during legislative sessions multiple days in a row. So I guess this isn't just in 2025. I guess I made a typo up there, but you get the idea here. Later, she was banished from the House floor, forced to set up a bench outside the doors of where she was elected to serve. Her voice in the legislature was physically removed. This is a potent example. A person elected to represent constituents prevented from speaking in the official chambers due to opposition to her views and identity. It's crazy. A county in Texas removed LGBTQ and racial books from public libraries. Conservative activists influenced county officials to remove books dealing with LGBTQ issues or race, labeling them inappropriate or pornographic. A federal judge ordered the books restored pending litigation, finding plausible free speech and due process concerns. And that right there is an example of censorship via control of public institutions, suppressing access to certain stories and viewpoints. Oh, I'm gonna hydrate with vodka because I'm about to get lit here. I'm about to get real irritated. So we have Meta, libs of TikTok, and trans-related content moderation, which I have experienced firsthand. Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, has an oversight board. They had to evaluate content moderation cases involving trans individuals. An example is a video of a trans woman using a woman's bathroom, or a trans girl winning female sports competitions. Those types of posts were shared by various conservative accounts on the platform, and some posts that disparaged trans identity or questioned gender identity were allowed under Meta's hate speech/harassment rules. Basically, they were not removed, even though they were upsetting. Content that many believe is harmful, yet is considered allowed speech under current moderation policies. I have tried to share reels about trans rights and trans identity. One of my reels that I was trying to boost was specifically based in fact, comparing trans, what's the word I'm looking for? Violent trans behavior versus the white man and his violent behavior. All right, why am I trying to sugarcoat this? I was talking about one of the many recent shootings that everyone claims is done by a trans shooter just for shits and giggles, because apparently that's the go-to now. But I was stating with facts, with numbers, with research that I took the time to go and read to make sure I wasn't spewing absolute bullshit. It's proven that trans people are less likely to commit crimes, but instead they're likely to be on the receiving end of hate and violence and crime. That reel that I made, that I tried to boost, was denied. However, if I had flipped the script and was talking shit about the trans community and saying that they are highly likely to commit crimes and they are highly likely to be the shooter and they are violent and whatever all this crazy rhetoric is out there, I could have boosted that post and I could almost guarantee it would have been approved. And as a matter of fact, I will be testing that theory in the coming weeks. Next, we have a comedian, Kumal Kamra, told a joke perceived as insulting towards a politician, referring to him as a traitor. And this was just in a little skit. This led to a whole police investigation. I'm blanking on her name. Amber, comedian. She's really funny because she's a comedian. Amber, she's a black woman. She was supposed to host the press dinner at the White House, and then they canceled her hosting it because they didn't like her viewpoints or whatever. That's silencing, free speech, another example of comedians being shit on. Bringing it back to Kunal, I think I said Kumal, sorry, Kunal. Anywho, angry mobs attacked the venue. And there have been earlier cases in India of comedians or artists facing legal complaints, threats, or violence after criticizing powerful political figures. We also have school and theater cancellations in US schools over LGBTQ plus content and what some people think are dark themes. So several high school plays or musicals with LGBTQ plus characters or themes or content involving self-harm, smoking, etc., have been canceled by school boards or administrators after parental complaints or political pressure. Examples include Indecent in Florida high schools, Marion or The True Tale of Robin Hood in Indiana, Spelling Bee in Ohio. The list goes on and on. Those are school plays that were canceled based on their content. These are cases where artistic expression or student speech gets shut down because parts of the public deem them too controversial. And it is very controversial now to be gay or to be trans. And that's where I'll leave the examples. I could go on and on and on about them, but let's get to something a little bit more recent. Part 3, Jimmy Kimmel, Charlie Kirk, and Trump's grip. He needs to get a fucking grip is what he needs to get. Let's talk about the story that everyone is whispering about. And by whispering, I mean screaming about. Jimmy Kimmel. So Kimmel made remarks after conservative activist Charlie Kirk was killed. He basically accused MAGA leaders of trying to politically cash in on Kirk's death. That's how they are interpreting it, and not necessarily how I was interpreting it. But why don't we actually listen to the clip of what he said so we can be crystal fucking clear? Let's take a listen.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Now, I can understand, shockingly, it might be shocking to some, I can understand why Republicans or MAGA Republicans feel negatively about what Jimmy Kimmel is saying. Because they're coming from the complete opposite end of the spectrum that I am essentially coming from, but I'm pretty good at putting myself in people's shoes. And so I could see how they listened to that clip or saw that clip and thought that he was saying that the shooter was MAGA, right? But if you really listen to his words and pause for a hot sec before you get heated, he is saying that Republicans and MAGA Republicans are trying to say that the shooter was anything but them. They were saying he was radicalized from the left. They were saying that he was trans, that he was dating a trans person. They were really deflecting instead of looking inward. So that's the way I took it. I don't think there was anything inappropriate about it, but that did not sit well with a lot of powerful people. Suddenly, ABC suspended Jimmy Kimmel Live, apparently indefinitely. Affiliates pulled the plug. The FCC, which is led by a Trump appointee, piled on. And Trump himself, he cheered like it was a Super Bowl. But why don't we also take a listen to some of the things that Charlie Kirk said? Things that were simply permitted to be said based on the right of free speech. And no one went after him because the people in charge are also racists. Let's take a listen.
The spiritual battle is coming to the West. And the enemies are wokeism or Marxism combining with Islamism to go after what we call the American way of life. And the American way of life is very simple. I want to be able to get married, buy a home, have kids, allow them to ride their bike till the sun goes down, send them to a good school, have a low-crime neighborhood, not to have my kid be taught the lesbian, gay, transgender garbage in their school, while also not having them have to hear the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day. That's important. We want the American way of life, which is, by the way, Christendom. Christians, our sacrifice, our toil, our vision, the outgrowth of the scriptures gave us Western civilization. And this is where I think is a great rallying cry. Doesn't matter if you're Hispanic, doesn't matter if you're Asian, doesn't matter if you're black or white. Everybody, if you are Christian and Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, these two threats are combining forces to come after us. And it's time that the church stands and rises up against it.
Yep. I mean, now I'm just being a cunt with my condescending tone before that clip, but those are two vastly different tones. One is a comedian hosting a show and usually gives some kind of breakdowns from recent news and speaking on current events. And the other is essentially stating that everyone except a straight white man or woman is garbage. Now, you might think, okay, a comedian went too far, got slapped on the wrist. But take a little zoom out. This is not just about Jimmy Kimmel. This is about how political power, corporate fear, and money all connect. Think about it. ABC and its affiliates rely on FCC licenses. The FCC is chaired by someone who owes their appointment to Trump. That's leverage. Just that enough should be concerning. Add advertisers who don't want controversy, plus conservative station groups like Nexstar that already lean very MAGA, and suddenly Kimmel's free speech does not look so free. And just to be really on the nose, let's review in simple bullet point terms, because this can be kind of hard to grasp. Like, I had to sit down a bunch of times to really think it through. So let's break it down, simple terms, okay? Because the Jimmy Kimmel cancellation sounds complicated, but it's really just a chain reaction of power, money, and influence. Think of it like a big, complicated game of dominoes. So first, Jimmy Kimmel says something controversial about Charlie Kirk. It's edgy, it's political, it ruffles feathers. ABC, his employer, is like the second domino. They're a big company. They don't want to upset anyone, especially not their affiliates, advertisers, or regulators. So they hit the pause button for a sec. Like, let's just suspend the show for now. Let's take a moment. Nexstar, the big group that owns a lot of ABC local stations, is the next domino. They can pull the show from their local stations. That's like saying, we don't want to air this anywhere because it might upset viewers and advertisers. And they have the right to do that. They can really do whatever they want. Then the FCC, which stands for, in case you didn't know, Federal Communications Commission. That's the next domino. They regulate the airways. The chair at the time, which is right now, is Trump appointed, which matters because he leans politically toward Trump's interests. The FCC doesn't have to act directly, but they hint that networks could face trouble if they air controversial content. Think of it as looming over ABC. Be careful what you broadcast, or there could be consequences. And Trump, he is like the puppet master holding the strings of the first 4 dominoes. I think there was 4 in that domino lineup. He can publicly praise or criticize, send signals to networks and regulators, and stir up political and media pressure, which he has been doing. His endorsement of the suspension makes everyone else feel like they have to follow along. He has quite literally said that he will defund different television conglomerates or corporations if they continue to speak negatively about him. You can also think of it like a schoolyard. Jimmy Kimmel is a kid telling a joke that the principal doesn't like. The principal tells him to sit down, then the hall monitors escort him out of the hallway. The school board hints that they might suspend recess for the whole class if he keeps joking, and outside, the mayor of the town cheers the whole thing on. Suddenly, one kid's joke turns into a major disciplinary action, and nobody's laughing anymore. It's not government censorship in the classic sense. It's death by corporation and political pressure. It's the marketplace being weaponized. Part 4, the money trail. At the end of the day, this all comes down to money. Everything always does. Networks don't want to risk losing advertisers. Affiliates don't want to risk regulatory retaliation. And Trump knows exactly how to use that. He doesn't even have to pass a law. Just hinting that the FCC might make life harder for broadcasters is enough to send executives running. And that's what's so dangerous. If comedy shows, late night hosts, media outlets are too afraid to criticize power because it might hit their bottom line, who's left to hold anyone accountable? This is the way it is in Russia. This is the way it is in China. I lived in China for 3 months, and you cannot get on any social media platforms. The news is completely controlled by the government. And when the news is completely controlled by the government, you're only going to hear good things about the president. You're only going to hear one side of the story. And let's face it, We're 50-50 split right down the middle. And if the only news that Trump supporters can receive is what they deem as good news, they're never going to see anything that Trump does as a negative. And the left is also going to have no representation. Every president has been criticized. Every president has been shit on. There has never been a president that has pleased every single solitary person. It's a late night talk show host job to make funny of who is in charge, because usually they're doing something stupid and annoying. And Trump just this week said it's no longer free speech when people only have negative things to say about him. I'm sorry, maybe try not being such a piece of shit and we might have something good to say about you. Give it a try. See what happens. Let's keep this ball rolling. Part 5. LGBTQ plus voices under threat. Now let's bring this home a little bit, okay? Because if late night comedians with millions of viewers can get silenced this fast, imagine what that means for marginalized voices, especially LGBTQ plus people. Let's not forget, it wasn't that long ago that TV stations would not air ads for Pride because they were deemed too controversial. And we saw just this last year, since Trump took office, way less ads, way less businesses taking part in Pride. Supporters and sponsors pulled out, and a lot of Pride festivities had to be canceled. And drag queens reading at libraries have been outright banned in various states across the country. A quick example, in Tennessee, a drag queen story hour was shut down last year after lawmakers passed anti-drag laws. Another one, Netflix once pulled an episode of Hassan Minhaj's Patriot Act because it criticized Saudi Arabia, a major investor, which I didn't even know that. Different community, same issue, speech gets silenced when money and power collide. And for LGBTQ plus folks, it's even scarier. Our art, our comedy, our activism, it often doesn't fit neatly into polite and acceptable. And let's face it, the world is boring without the gays creating art. We're the only reason there's anything creative happening in this world. That's the point. It changes norms. And when powerful people don't like it, they call it obscene. They call it dangerous, and they try to erase it. As queer activist Audre Lorde once said, your silence will not protect you. But here's the flip side. When systems force silence, it doesn't just harm the speaker, it harms the entire community. Here's the thing with this whole Jimmy Kimmel situation. Here's what it really shows us. If you're only getting your news from one place or only trusting mainstream outlets, you're getting a very curated, filtered version of reality. News stations like Fox and even CNN kind of at times don't feel like news. They feel more like opinion shows. Think about it. ABC, Nexstar, the FCC, even Trump cheering it on, all of them have their own incentives. They're worried about money, political pressure, regulators, advertisers. This doesn't mean they're lying outright, but it does mean the story you see is shaped by who's controlling the microphones. Just like I said earlier in the episode, you can see Jimmy Kimmel's comments from two very different ends of the spectrum. And in this case, the story is about silencing a voice that made people uncomfortable. And if that applied to everyone, Charlie Kirk would have been canceled a long time ago because 50% of the population was made very uncomfortable by his rhetoric. And that's why it's so important to get your news from many sources. Read from outlets across the political spectrum, seek out independent media, follow journalists who are reporting on issues that mainstream media might skim over. Broaden your list of podcasts, maybe even go over the pond. See what Britain is saying about us. I think it's really important to find out what other countries are saying about us because I'm pretty sure the world is embarrassed for us. And this is especially true when it comes to marginalized communities. LGBTQ plus voices, people of color, disabled creators. These are people whose perspectives are often pushed to the side, ignored, or drowned out by the dominant narrative. And being the dominant narrative, you are the ones who are made uncomfortable, right? So a straight white man watching a television show that might have, well, I was going to say lesbians, but we know that straight white men are turned on by lesbians, so that's not going to fly. But a gay couple, it's going to make them uncomfortable because they cannot identify with those characters. But on the flip side of that, for me, speaking for myself, Growing up my whole life, I didn't see a lot of characters on TV that I could relate with. I didn't see a lot of gay characters. So I am uncomfortable. And then it finally takes people like me to create those characters, just like someone in a wheelchair. Like, why are there never characters that are in a wheelchair? Because there's a fucking shit ton of people in a wheelchair. Like, why can't we represent everyone? Even though the world has been built, the country has been built by straight white people for straight white people, and they're the biggest snowflakes of all. They're the biggest fucking pussies because they are scared of seeing anything that is not them. But what about the rest of us? I digress. Reel it in, Josh. My point my point there is amplifying voices like gay voices, black voices, disabled voices isn't just about fairness. It's about getting closer to the truth. It's about what our world actually looks like. That's what I meant to say in my spiel. So do your own research, question the headlines, check your sources, and don't just scroll past the voices that make you uncomfortable or challenge your assumptions, because in order to change and evolve, we have to get a little uncomfy. The minute we stop digging and stop questioning and stop listening to people outside the power structures, we let the story be told only by those who benefit from keeping it one-sided. So the Kimmel firing, it's a cautionary tale. One comedian gets silenced, and suddenly it's a ripple effect, showing how much control the mainstream media, political power, and money have over what we hear, what we see, and even think. And if you don't actively seek out other perspectives, you're just swallowing the narrative that's being carefully handed and curated for you and to you. And slight side note here, it's also concerning that Trump is negotiating with China to have 6 members of the, I want to say 17. My numbers could be way off, but it's like a third of the members on TikTok's board being American citizens or from the US. And if that happens, then are they going to start to filter out what we can and cannot share, what we can and cannot see? Is my algorithm going to completely change? Like, if Trump is taking over all of the news media and social media, just like he's already inserted himself in Meta, Facebook, Instagram, now TikTok, and Elon Musk is running Twitter, like, or owns Twitter rather, is all this information just going to be so fucking far right leaning that we're never going to get anything else? Like, sorry, not democracy. Nor is that a world I want to live in. And that brings us to part 6, why this matters. Here is the bigger picture. Free speech is fragile, and the people who need it most, minorities, dissidents, comedians, artists, are usually the first to feel the crackdown. We need to be asking, who decides what's too offensive? Who benefits when someone gets canceled? And more importantly, what voices are we losing that we may never get back? That's the scary part. Will we turn this around? And the thing that really shows the double standard in free speech right now, Charlie Kirk. He can say things, or sorry, he used to say things like, gay people are a middle finger to God, or claim that Jesus supported stoning the gays. And he also said that he would not want a black pilot. And for the most part, he gets to walk away scot-free. And why? Because that's considered freedom of speech. And because, let's be honest, a lot of people feel the same way and support him politically. And I probably shouldn't have said he gets to walk away scot-free because he was killed. I didn't intend for that to be like a joke or anything, because I still don't think it's okay that he was shot. But the kicker is that the second a gay man or a trans woman or a black pilot stands up and calls that rhetoric what it is, which is racist, which is homophobic, which is dangerous, they get laughed at. They're told to shut the fuck up or accused of being too sensitive. That isn't free speech. That's free speech for some people and not for everyone. I'm going to pause there and go off on another tangent, because I was watching this reel the other day that was all the clips of Trump saying that he's going to reinstate free speech. He's going to bring free speech back. And I remember seeing that when it happened. And then, of course, watching that reel now tells a very different story. What he really meant was that things that were not deemed PC, like racism, homophobia, sexism, misogyny, all those things, that's what he was bringing back. He was bringing back free speech for the racists. He was bringing back free speech for the homophobes. He was bringing back free speech for the people that hate anyone who is not like them. That's what he meant. Let's be really fucking clear. Let's be really fucking real. Trump wants to bring back hate speech. I said it. I'll say it again. That was part of his goal. Because his supporters are largely MAGA, who are racist, who are homophobic, who are extremely religious. That was like a dog whistle. And I've heard that term so many times, and it took me a second to really digest what a dog whistle was. That was his dog whistle to MAGA, that you can now go ahead and hate whoever the fuck you want, say whatever the fuck you want, post whatever you want, target whoever you want, and you're free to do so with no repercussions. That's what Trump meant when he said he was bringing back free speech, hate speech. And that is exactly why we need to pay attention. Because if free speech only works when it supports the people in power, it's not really free at all. If we don't even defend free speech, even the stuff that we disagree with, we are setting the stage for silence to spread. And once silence becomes the norm, especially for LGBTQ plus people and other marginalized groups, our fight for visibility and equality becomes so much harder. I feel drained. It's a lot to think about, and it's a lot to consider, and it's like extremely concerning and scary. And sometimes I'm like, wait, have I been radicalized by the left? And then I pause and I'm like, no, you have every fucking right to to be living in fear currently. So that is today's deep dive into free speech, into power, and into profit, and also into some bullshit. Whether it's Jimmy Kimmel, a drag queen in Tennessee, or your favorite queer creator on TikTok, the struggle is the same. Our words matter, but they're under constant threat. So the next time that someone tells you that free speech is alive and well, ask them, for who? Thanks for tuning into Hot Air. If you like this episode, share it, rate it, and keep the conversation going, because free speech only survives if we use it. And that's why it's so important to share content from creators that you feel get it, that have a message that you feel the rest of us need to know. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod. You can submit your listener stories or topic suggestions on my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com. New episodes come out every Tuesday and Friday, and I am going to go scream into a pillow now. And then I'm going to keep creating content that's actually based in fact and truth. But before I do that, spooky season is coming. So October, while I will still be sharing listener stories and queer good stuff, I love Halloween. I'm going to keep it gay, but I'm going to be getting into some spooky season episodes, still working through them. But just know, we're going to be getting into queer horror movies, queer books, all the spooky things, but from a very LGBTQ plus angle. I'm also going to be doing a newsletter. I'm deciding whether it's going to be once a month or twice a month, but you can sign up also on my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com. I'm going to be including all of the recent events in the queer community, or that the queer community should know, anything that's in the news that I think we should be aware about, because obviously I can only cover so much. Clips from episodes, maybe some behind the scenes stuff, some more stuff about me. So if you want to receive that newsletter, of course, it's free. Just head onto the website, sign up for the newsletter on that homepage, and I'm thinking the first one will come out October 1st, which is the 6-month anniversary of Hot Air. So that'll be a little 6-month celebration. Still in the works, but just keeping you in the know here. So again, thanks for listening to Hot Air. I'm Joshua Robert, and I will see you next Tuesday.